theme that I really want to concentrate on in looking at the Agamemnon and throughout the Oresteia is the theme of justice. It has entered into our treatment in the Agamemnon. We've talked about this problem that is bouncing back and forth inside of Agamemnon's family tree in the house of Atreus. How are we supposed to deal with this problem of justice? We have past generations that have committed horrible crimes that require revenge, but that revenge itself spurs further retribution. So we've got a kind of curse or evil that's stuck inside the family tree. The way to get it out is not obvious. It's very hard to try to figure out how that's going to happen. To get at this, we need to start to unpack some Greek concepts circling around the idea of justice. This becomes especially apparent when we compare how Homer treated the story of Orestes with how Aeschylus treats the story of Orestes. Remember, Homer pulled this out for his own uses as a way to kind of help nudge Telemachus into action, saying, listen, even when things are really tough and you have to take revenge against your own mother, in Orestes' case, it's time for action. So Homer focuses on that aspect of the story. Very different with Aeschylus. Instead, what we have is, gosh, look at this awful thing that's happening to this family. The story that courses around Orestes in the Agamemnon is the first installment. We're not going to be reading the libation bearers for our part of the class, although I recommend that you read it on your own as you have time. And then we're going to read the final installment, the Eumenides or the Furies. In all these three plays, ideas of justice are what's at the center. So Orestes is faced with this incredibly difficult problem to try to right the wrongs that are in his family, but then how is he going to do it without perpetuating the cycle of revenge that's built into this set of events? The problem of justice here is a knotty one. It's a very difficult one. It's famously difficult. How are we going to unravel the problem in the house of Atreus without committing more crimes that's going to provoke even more retribution? It is incumbent upon Orestes to kill his father's murderer. That would be widely understood in antiquity. If someone murders your father, gosh, heaven forbid, it's up to you. You need to be the one that executes justice to take care of the murderer. If family members just decided not to do that, well, it would not only be a little sad, but it would be a great source of shame for the family. Gosh, if someone did that to your family, you'd have to take action. Orestes is forced in a position now of taking revenge against his father's murderer. But now what happens when the act of revenge is itself going to be a crime against the family? Orestes has to kill his own mother now to try to avenge the murder of his father. This is where things start to get especially ugly. How are we going to wash this curse out? How are we going to get rid of it? Now, justice has a couple of different ways that we might think about it. The balance is oftentimes tossed out as being sort of core here. We've got an extra wrinkle tossed in as on the one side of the scale of justice, we've got our gavel indicating regular old courtroom justice. On the other side, we've got the gun, indicating taking justice into your own hands. So where is it exactly that we're going to find justice in this scheme? Would it be in a building like this? Notice it's Romanesque architecture based on Greek precedents. Would it be in a building like this? Well, for the Greeks, we're kind of looking at a time when such a thing might be possible. Such a thing might actually start to happen. We'll see when we get to the Eumenides that our story is actually going to move toward a concept of justice that is going to be more recognizable from a modern frame than the one we've been talking about up till now. In order to get a grip on what we've been talking about in this story, we need to anchor ourselves in a really important ancient concept. That is the concept of miasma. I've printed it here in very small print for dramatic effect because it is an outsized and hugely important concept in this story. Miasma is a Greek term that means a kind of cloud of pollution. It's a cloud of pollution. And a miasma would hover around a corpse, someone that was killed, someone who had a violent episode of death that visited upon them. Their corpse would be surrounded by this cloud of nasty, toxic stuff. Now, if someone who was engaged in that killing, they would have this miasma stuck on them. They would be impure. The guilt would stick to them like a stain, and it would be very clear who it was that committed the crime. The stick of this nastiness gets stuck onto them, and now because they have that nastiness on them, they are indeed guilty. they're subject to retribution and punishment. It just so happens that it could take place that someone else who has nothing to do with the murder just happens by that corpse and comes in contact with the cloud of miasma that surrounds it, and they get stained by it. Well, that person who had got that part of the stain on them would now become subject to retribution and subject to revenge, even though they hadn't done anything. The Greeks imagined that this revenge was triggered by these kind of elemental forces, physicalist, with physical manifestations built into the environment around us. For the cases of murder, those forces would lead toward retribution that was clearly built into the actions that the person him or herself had taken. But for someone who just happened across it and guiltlessly ran into a polluted corpse, well, now revenge would all of a sudden be visited upon them, and they would suffer greatly, and it wouldn't be clear what kind of actions they had done to provoke this. One asks oneself, in this particular, with this concept as a core, how just is that? How much does this count as justice? Well, the concept of miasma doesn't actually equate to ideas of justice, but what it does is give us a background to try to think about how they imagine justice might take place. The theory that surrounds miasma gives us a window into how people make explanations when bad things start happening to good people. When bad things start happening to good people. Those of us who think that, well, you get your just deserts, those who commit crimes get punished for those crimes, we imagine ourselves thinking, yeah, well, if they're getting punished, there's probably a good reason, they probably committed the crime, and now bad things are going to happen to them. The Greeks, on the other hand, have a very different sort of central notion here. If someone's getting punished, what does that mean? It means that they have pollution. It means that they have pollution. That's what's happened to them. Now, that pollution always raises the possibility that, yeah, they were engaged in some nasty action and therefore were polluted because they touched a corpse, but it also raises the possibility that someone, through no fault of their own, just happened by there, got polluted, and so they're getting revenge against them even though they didn't deserve it. So the Greek concept of miasma builds in just retribution as well as retribution that doesn't quite seem so just. It's part and parcel of how they understand all of revenge to be happening. It's connected to this nasty pollution that gets visited upon people. Now, all the things that get connected with miasma, evil, guilt, stain, pollution, similarly also toxicness, drugs that might kill you, in other words, some kind of awfulness that could be visited upon you, inability to wash out a stain, attempts at purification that don't get worked out, all of these are coursing around themes that are anchored to this Greek idea of miasma. In fact, the Agamemnon is working with a sense of justice that's built around ideas of revenge, miasma built into the blood, and all of these things get connected together through this concept. Now, what happens as Aeschylus is doing this, he's portraying for us, as the Greeks that we are, witnessing this in the classical period, an idea of justice that would have been anchored in ancient mythic times. When Aeschylus is writing this, there are other ideas of justice that are starting to come around that aren't necessarily just based on personal familial revenge, anchored around this concept of miasma and floating guilt that might be connected to someone who deserves it and someone who doesn't. Here in the concept over here, we've got a connection to blood, right? The blood of the corpse causes this awful stench around it, and that stench can get rubbed off on other people. It has a sort of elemental, tactile feel to it. That is the marker of when just deserts are visited upon someone, whether they're just or unjust, is whether they have this pollution against them. So pollution here is anchored to a notion of blood. Blood, just as we're talking about with blood ties within families, we've got an idea of a connection between people that can be supportive on some senses. When family can be that way, can also be quite nasty. And when the blood itself becomes polluted and diseased, then inside the family a kind of polluted miasma of disease is being sent down from generation to generation. Just as they share blood, they're also going to share this pollution. Now, within this system, it gets very hard to figure out how in the world someone could solve the problem of bringing justice to the family of Atreus. How in the world are we going to get this curse out when it's built into our own blood? We're going to see that Aeschylus is going to present for us a completely different idea of justice that's going to be based on some brand new concepts that are emerging in the classical period. It's going to help us solve what in mythic times, you and I, classical Greeks, remember these mythic times way back before us, what in mythic times was a very hard thing to solve, this knotty problem in the family of the House of Atreus. Our own classical time, the modern Greek classical time that we know, is going to have a solution for us as we move forward into Aeschylus's Furies, a play called the Eumenides.